All right, we are here on chapter 12, talking about variable pay. So last time we covered kind of the basics of compensation, and and I argue that it can create kind of an entitlement mindset of where no matter what I do today, if I do good, I get paid the same. If I do bad, I get paid the same, and so we can create problems. So one solution to that, or one component of a solution to that, is something called variable pay, and that is just what it sounds like. It's pay that varies on something. So you might argue that, hey, every year I'm at this company, I get a 3% raise, so my pay varies with seniority. That's okay. If that happens, the organization is not rewarding good performance, they are rewarding being there, having a pulse, and not getting fired. So whatever the pay varies on is what's going to be valued, is what's going to be kind of repeated. So in a perfect world, we have variable pay based on performance. That is, when somebody does better, they get more money. When somebody does worse, they get less money. So if I'm looking at this, variable pay is simply compensation that's tied with performance somehow. A lot of different ways for that to happen, but the big idea is that if you are a really good employee, then the compensation system really rewards that with not just recognition and praise or whatever, but also financially. And if you are a bad employee, you don't get paid very much, and so you would like to leave the company. If you remember our conversation on turnover, what that can create is called functional turnover, whereas your best performing employees will tend to stay because they're getting paid, and your lower performing employees will tend to leave because they're not getting paid quite as much. So, a few assumptions. We need to analyze these a little bit. Number one, some people or groups contribute more to organizational success than others. Is that true? Most people would say, yeah, that's probably true. The landscapers at Google are important, but not as important maybe for the organization, for firm survival as the programmers, for instance. Or at Coca-Cola, manufacturing Coca-Cola, does that matter? Yes, it matters a lot, but maybe not as much as marketing, where somebody's actually going to, buy the product. So some people contribute more or less to success. Number two, some people perform better and are more productive than others. Pretty much nobody disagrees with this. Some people are better at jobs and it's better fit for them or whatever. Number three, employees or groups who perform better or contribute more should receive greater compensation. This has a massive cultural undertone. Some people might read that and say, why? If there's three of us on a team and our team produces a certain amount, that's what we should get. Well, the person who's the best on the team says, well, that's not really fair because I did more. And the person who's the worst on the team says, well, of course that's fair because we all work together. So that third bullet point has a lot of what's called individualistic. You might look at it like a meritocracy. Certainly you see it in capitalism. Undertones where if you produce more, you should get more. That's kind of the transaction. That's the assumption when we talk about variable pay. I'm not going to go through all these. This is a crazy slide. There is a million different things, a million different tools in a manager's toolbox for creating a variable pay system. There's some rules about it. We have to do it in a fair way, but there's no shortage of things that we can do. But looking overall, we want to ask these three questions. Number one, does the plan fit the organization? So if I am at Boeing, I probably shouldn't be paying my builders, my assemblers for speed. I should probably do it for quality. Why? Because it's a $100 million product that goes 700 miles an hour through the air and carries 300 people. That's a lot of numbers in there, but you get the idea. It's not about slapping it together quickly. If you're producing knockoff Crocs in a manufacturing facility that you're going to sell to Walmart, you can probably pay for speed there. High quality is maybe not your baby. Does the plan reward the appropriate actions? That is, if it's variable pay, we're going to pay people for certain things. And the question is simply, are we paying for the right things? What we pay for is going to get repeated. So for instance, let's say you're a car dealership and you have a bad reputation for pushy salespeople. I'd bet a lot of money that you probably pay those salespeople when they sell cars. You don't pay them, for instance, for customer return or customer retention or customer satisfaction. So if I'm rewarding selling cars, that's fine. That produces revenue, but that's what I'm going to get. I'm not going to get customer care. I'm going to get selling cars. The last one is the plan administered properly, all kinds of laws and rules we've already kind of gone through. So in my head, a lot of variable pay plans should be and usually are framed around this concept of what are called KPIs, or key performance indicators. We say, what is the thing that makes the biggest difference in this job, in whatever the job is? I don't care. Maybe car sales is the same thing. What are your KPIs for that job? There's a management perspective called management by objectives. Talked about it a little bit when we did the performance management section. And that would be driven by these KPIs. So you may say, as a professor, the most important thing is what, fill in the blank, right? If you're an R1 university, it's probably papers published, books written, stuff like that, keynotes given. If you're a teaching university, it's going to be something about student experience, right? However you're going to measure that. Those would be your KPIs, and basically what you'd say is, on this job, whoever has this job, these are the 3 things, the 5 things, whatever it is, that I want you to mainly focus on. If I'm really good at making copies, that's not really a KPI for my job. Okay, we're gonna look at different components of variable pay plans at 3 different levels. The individual level, that is, if I do good, I get paid more. The group and team level, if my team does good, my team gets paid more. And the organizational level, which is if we all do good, then we all get paid more. So at an individual level, there's a thing called the piece rate system. There's a straight piece rate system. Is okay, for every cell phone you sell, you get $30. For every car that you sell, you get $1,000, whatever it is. So it's this for that. Maybe when you were younger, your grandfather said, I'll give you a dime for every weed that you pull out of my flower bed. That's a piece rate system. For everything you produce, you get something in return, which means, as you can see, if you produce a lot, you make a lot of money. And if you produce little, you don't make very much money. You can use bonuses, spot bonuses. Bonuses are a one-time payment, usually kind of a lump sum. They don't go into the person's annual salary. Those are great, especially for like certain clear behaviors that were really strong. You can use them with recognition awards. I do have a caveat on this slide. It talks about service awards. I know a lot of companies do that. Back to the original question, are the appropriate actions being rewarded? I would say if we're giving someone a service reward, we just have to remember that we're paying them for having a pulse and not getting fired. I mean, that's really it. If that's what we want to reward, then that's okay. Someone says, I've been here for 30 years. Yeah, but you've been horrible for 30 years. And now we're going to give the person an award for being there. So when we do that, we are rewarding retention. We are not rewarding performance. In some firms, that really matters. I'm imagining like a knowledge-intense institution like NASA. Okay, you're not really good at NASA if you're a design engineer for the first 5 or 6 years that you're there, because you're still learning everything. But if someone's at NASA 20 years, 30 years, longer, something like that, NASA might say, yep, we want to put some money on that to keep the knowledge that's in their heads, called knowledge retention, to keep that here in our firm. We're going to put some money, or at least some recognition, for their longevity. Group and team level, if you've ever had a group project, especially in school, it's a tough setup. So let's talk about it a little bit. We've kind of got to decide what actually is the work group or the work team. Like, for instance, if I'm working on a team of professors and we secure a grant that has group level compensation, does my secretary get any of that? Because they did a lot of work, or my department chair because he did a lot of work, for instance. So what is the team? When does a payout happen, or when is the measuring stick kind of done? But the biggest one, if you've ever been on a team, you know, is there is an unequal amount of contribution in basically every team. That's just the nature of teamwork. There will be what are called free riders, the people that just hang out, show up, check in, don't do anything, and a couple people that really drive the performance of the team. So if you're going to give everybody the same bonus or the same variable pay at a team level, you're going to have low performers. I don't have to do anything here, I get paid, and high performers frustrated because they carried the load for the team. One of the ways that we try to deal with that has to do with the group size. If there is 10 people on the team, you're going to have a lot of free riders. If there's 3 people on the team, it's much harder to hide the individual contribution. At an organizational level, you've probably heard the term profit sharing. Profit sharing just means we get a certain number of profits as the firm this year, and we're going to share an amount of that, whatever it is. Maybe a typical scenario is the formula is whatever profits we get, we take 5% of it, and we put it into a pool that we're going to share with employees. and it's going to be driven based on their performance and maybe their years of service, if that matters to you, and it's divided up and it's passed out. Profit sharing is great. It gives people kind of a sense of ownership. It's certainly something that you would use to attract people to come to your firm, but it doesn't really drive individual performance. The reason for that is if I'm in a company with 200 people, I don't go home at night and go, wow, like if I just did this stuff different at work, then maybe we'd be more profitable. The fact is the group is so large that individual contribution really gets lost. But it is a nice way of driving culture if you want to. You have to figure out how you're going to fund it and how you're going to allocate it to employees. Another organizational level variable pay is called, you can give people stock if you want, employee stock. It's an ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. And the other one is a stock option. Stock options, it's important to note, don't really drive performance, they drive retention. So a stock option basically means you get three information. I'm going to give you, you can purchase this number of shares at this time, for how long, and at this price. And so if our stock is trading today at $50, I may say, hey, in the future, you guys, I'm giving you stock options at $55 a share. The idea there is that they would stay until the stock goes up to 70 bucks a share, 80 bucks a share, and then they might exercise those options. So it's rare when you have someone go, oh, I got stock options, I need to work harder so our stock price goes up. People don't usually think of it in that way, but they do think of it of, I don't want to leave the company for the next 3 years just in case that stock price goes up. So it's really about retention of your high performing employees. A couple of weird areas just to cover really quick: sales compensation and executive comp. Sales compensation it can be complex, it can be very political, because sales and marketing is usually what drives the revenue for the firm. So if we screw this up and we don't pay people for the right things, then revenue for the firm will not be valued and won't be pursued. So we look at heuristics in sales, like it's easier to keep a customer than it is to go find a new one. So we talk about rewarding customer retention. Or you may say, one person that talks bad about your company hurts worse than 4 people talking good about your company, because negative, again, is so much stronger than positive. So however we want to set it up, it's fine. It just needs to be consistent with whatever the strategy is for the firm. If you want to run a sleazy car dealership where it's just churning cars as fast as you can, you're probably gonna pay based on sales, not based on customer experience, satisfaction, stuff like that. If returning customers are a big deal to you, if you're a dentist's office, a doctor's office, or building a relationship with customers over the long haul is actually what drives revenue, then that needs to be a part of it. So either way, this isn't something that we throw together, especially on the sales side and on the executive side. Both, they have lots of complexities. Executive compensation is usually handled a little different than regular employee compensation. There's a few reasons for that. When we talk about C-suite executives, we're usually talking about entrusting that group of people with the long-term viability of the organization in a different way than any employee working in any particular job. So it's very much at a macro level, and the controversy really has to deal with money. People think that executive compensation is market driven and not performance driven. So an example of that would be an executive that gets a $50 million bonus payout at the end of the year after laying employees off and maybe having lower revenue than the year before, lower profit than the year before. People look at that and go, wait a second, if I did bad at my job, I wouldn't get a $50 million bonus. Why does that executive get it? And they argue over like what's fair and what's right. They say, oh, LeBron James makes so much money as a basketball player. Does he really bring that much money in to whatever team he's on that particular time? I understand the logic. It's based on equity, based on fairness. The problem is it's the framework of the question is all wrong. What is my house worth? Is it worth what the appraiser says? Is it worth what I think it's worth? Is it worth the amount of money it would take to rebuild it or purchase the land? It's not worth any of those. My house is worth what somebody will write the check for, period. It's not worth any more or less than what somebody's willing to pay for it. So executive compensation is driven by market. It's what is somebody willing to pay? Well, if someone's willing to pay $50 million to lay employees off and have low profit, then that's what the job is worth. It's market driven. Again, it's not necessarily equity or performance driven. And I think that's what creates a lot of that kind of the political rub about it. Executive compensation market usually has a lot of components connected to it that normal employee compensation doesn't. Of course, your base salary, benefits, heavily driven by incentives, especially if it's a publicly traded company, heavily driven by the ability to raise stock price, assuming it's good, more equity for the firm. And then where people get frustrated is the perks, the long-term incentives, and the exit package. We won't get into it, things like golden parachutes and golden handcuffs, stuff like that, where if you're going to hire me as a CEO, I'm going to say, look, I'm going to do my best, but there's a lot of things that I can't control. And so I could take any one of these safe jobs over here and make a whole bunch of money, but I will be the CEO of your firm. Part of that deal is when you fire me, you're giving me $2 million out the door. That's my severance, no matter what the reason is I'm fired. If I do insider trading and I go to jail, you're paying me $2 million outside the door. And you may say, well, no, that's crazy. We're not going to do that. And my response is, then go find another CEO, because that's the market and that's what the next person will demand anyway. That's usually where people get frustrated. My thoughts on like personal level on it, just go research it. This is heavily political to the point where it's even tough to have a public conversation about. People say, oh, it's the rich executives that taking advantage of the poor people, or you may say, like I have my brother-in-law runs a firm. He is third, fourth generation owner of this firm. It's a small company, and he makes more than everybody else. And when we have family dinners on Sundays, we don't see him. I mean, he's working, or he's out building new products, or he's traveling to try to sell. He's doing something where all the other employees are home having Sunday afternoon dinner. Now, he does make a lot more money, and this is what he's chosen to do. But when it comes up, people would say, oh, that's just the rich guy making too much money. Well, maybe, I don't know, but there is a trade-off for it, right? It's not straightforward. So do your own research, figure out where you stand on this in the conversation that you want to have around the Sunday dinner table, which I hope you get to be at. So build that perspective, whatever it is, establish your conviction, but hold it loosely, because chances are, as I talk to people at different points in their career, their opinion and their conviction does tend to shift. So biggest thing on executive compensation: A, know that it's market driven, and B, know that it's like sex, politics, and religion. You probably don't want to talk about it too much publicly. So with that, we'll go to the next one.